We will now move to another really important topic, which is relating business architecture to other teams. And you remember I said top 2 success factors for a business architecture team: continuous value delivery and being able to integrate with other teams, being able to essentially integrate into the fabric of an organization. So what are the benefits of business architecture to other teams? And I'll show a list of teams. You've seen it a little bit earlier. But for other teams, business architecture can provide a reusable framework that can be used in a number of different ways. The first is to inform, translate, and align business direction. We've looked at that. Focus on strategy, for example, and strategic planning. I would be particularly interested there. But it also gives us a construct for design, redesign, and optimization of an organization. So here we care about, alignment from a process perspective, or people in human-centered design will be interested, or people in organization design will be interested. All right, so organization design is a good example. I've worked with organization designers, and they're trying to design a part of the organization, but we give them the macro level view, right? We give them the big scaffolding. And business architecture can even be a catalog for organizing other things. So requirements are a good example. We'll take a look at that a little bit later on. But we can categorize our requirements by capabilities, which make them reusable. Right? So capabilities do serve as a bit of a catalog. Business architecture also helps other teams because it connects those teams to the rest of the enterprise for a holistic view. And here's what I mean on that. You might have a risk framework, a risk taxonomy, excellent, but that's sort of isolated. But if you can understand the risks and how they apply to the capabilities, well, now we know if we understand the capabilities impacted, we can get to everything else, right? I can understand which processes and systems and people are impacted by that capability. Or sustainability is another really good example. There are wonderful and important sustainability frameworks, but if we can also tie sustainability measurement into capabilities, well, now we can measure sustainability at the capability level and be actionable about how we target improvement and harmonizing those with the other things that are going on in the organization. So the part of the value of connecting domains from other disciplines to the business architecture is they get connected to that bigger picture, to the bigger knowledge base for a broader set of decision making. And also, business and enterprise architects are just good thinking partners. We think in different ways. We connect dots. We tend to abstract and pattern things, and that can be valuable thought process to bring to what others are doing, and we can most certainly offer new insights as well. So, as always, it's a journey, and the way to think about integrating with other teams is one team at a time, right? Step by step. So the starting point is to create an engagement model. So, and this is definitely something you can do as an action item. Who are all the teams that business architecture, your enterprise architecture team needs to interface with, right? Just list them out. You can then also understand what value does business architecture provide to each of those teams? Or what are the inputs or outputs? Oftentimes that's contextual. But just creating an engagement, just the list of teams that you work with, and prioritize them and start building relationships with them. It's all about intent, all right? You don't have to meet with everybody tomorrow, but just to at least know who you care about and who you're starting conversations with first is valuable. So sort of there's a natural process that happens over time, and this is just human relationship building, all right? So between business architecture or all of enterprise architecture and each team, we're usually starting with awareness. Hey, we're starting a new business architecture practice. Here's the value that we're doing. Here's how we're positioned. Here's what we're thinking about doing over the next year. Here's how we think we might add value to you. Hey, got any ideas for stuff we can work on together, right? That's sort of the first awareness stage. And sharing visions, plans, things like that. Over time, we move into a closer partnership. And so for some of the teams that we work with, like let's say human-centered design, we'll actually cross-map content. Right? So we may actually cross-map journeys to value streams, right? Or for business analysis, we'll actually cross-map requirements to capabilities. So we start, remember, just enough, just in time. So we start cross-mapping those things as we have a reason to do so, to be able to support business decision-making. And we're not going to do it all at one time, especially for things where there's a lot to cross-map, like applications or processes or requirements, right? We're going to do just what makes sense for our scope. We also, over time, may get more intentional about coordinating visions and plans and initiatives, and we start pulling each other into the things we're doing. Again, this is very human. Hey, we're working on a transformation, and we think human-centered design needs to be involved. Come with us, come get at the table. Those things go a long way, because remember, strategy execution and intentional design take all of us, right? And as business architecture, we tend to connect the dots, and we can be instigators for these things in a really good way. And then the last stage there is just over time, we have closer integration, particularly with some disciplines. Again, I think business analysis is a good example. We will continue cross-mapping more and more information over time as we see value. And we may even create some formal integration where maybe in the business analysis procedures, we're going to now reflect receiving business architecture as input, or maybe we'll be tweaking role descriptions a little bit to reflect the existence of business architecture. And we just keep doing it until, and this is the best sign of maturity, business architecture isn't a separate thing anymore. It's just how we think. It's how we work. It's entirely embedded into the organizations, into what other teams do, and into all of our processes and decision making. So the scope of partnerships. I like to think about a couple categories of partners. The first I'll just call consumers, for lack of a better word. So these are people who are consuming the results of using business architecture. So that risk manager that consumed the capability map that was heat mapped around risk, or the compliance manager that could trace through how the legislation was implemented across the organization, or the sustainability leader, right, that could see a view of sustainability performance and a path towards how we're going to achieve it. So these are often business, product, or function leaders. And on this side, we don't always have things we're cross-mapping to them, as I was alluding to earlier. But change delivery partners, there's a different relationship here. These are the people that we are partnering with to get idea into action, from strategy to execution. So you'll remember me showing earlier that view of the strategy execution steps and then the different teams below. So these I'll just refer to as change delivery partners. And so these partners are both going to hopefully find value in business architecture for their own decision making, but we're also going to work hand in hand, playing different and complementary roles to translate ideas into action. And for change delivery partners, this is, like I said, for many, not all, but many of those disciplines, they're going to have a domain that we're actually going to connect or cross-map to the business architecture. So that gives you a couple buckets to think about. I won't go into detail on consumers today because there are many of them, and we could talk about how to apply business architecture for value for a long, long time. But I'll talk a little bit more about change delivery partners now. So for example, strategy teams, business relationship management, experience design, and you hear me refer to that different ways. So when I say human-centered design, I mean the bigger bucket of experience design, service design, UX design. I call it experience design because it may not be just for customers or constituents. It should and may also be for partners and employees. Business architecture, of course, IT architecture, together enterprise architecture, organizational change management, a very important partner. Architecture is a little bit for lack of a better word, the harder side of change, that exactly what's going to happen to who and when, where organizational change management really helps humans, right? Helps the people through that change. So very complementary. Planning, that is just a generic way to refer to all sorts of different types of planning teams. Business analysis, organization design, business process management, and solution architecture. So across all those, you see our people, process, technology, information, right? The things I've been talking about, and more. So just to give a general sequence of change delivery partners, and I have a lot of caveats over there on the side, just to be really clear, because this is not linear, and it's human, and it's iterative, right? But teams tend to come into this sequence at a certain point in time, or they come in with more significant involvement at a certain point in time. Though there is a lot of collaboration and iteration between them, and everybody's going to, play some sort of a role throughout or downstream. But just to give you a general sequence of those change delivery partners, of course, we'd have strategy team, or leaders, whoever's formulating the strategy in your organization. That's at the beginning there. Business relationship managers are often, I also see, kind of quite up front there. And they may be focused on a part of an organization, but they are a very key partner for business architecture. They're also a very key consumer for business architecture, right? Experience design. So when I think about the input to business architecture, it is, yes, direction, strategy, business model, but so is the experience, right? So experience design right here up front. How does it need to work for people? What do we need to change? And that is going to be also translated through the business architecture value streams and capabilities to help make these experiences real and harmonize them with other work going on in the organization. Business architecture, same place. IT architecture, I've just a little bit over. Business architecture, tip of the spear there. Though, again, remember, it's not sequential, and we may be pulling people up for conversations and iterating and things like that. Organization design is wonderful discipline. It does play a role up front here as we're, laying things out, and it also plays a role downstream, along with HR and others, to help make the organizational changes real that we may shape. And then organizational change management, I also have coming in very early. I see a lot of organizations treat it sort of as an afterthought. Oh, we're rolling out something. Yep, let's do some training and communication for the people, right? But organization change management is a very powerful and strategic discipline to be thinking about up front. And organizational change management can also help us to inform our direction, right? Depending on what it does to the people, or inform what we do and when. And organization change management also, when it's up front here and working together with business architecture, it can look at the whole set of change that's planned by stakeholder in a methodical way, instead of sort of going initiative by initiative. I just have planning kind of in the middle. Again, that is all sorts of ways that from strategic planning to product and agile teams, right? That's a lot of forms. Business analysis. So a lot of people will say, what's the difference between business architecture and business analysis? Right? I think as we've talked today, it's probably pretty clear, but minimally you can see we're playing at different parts of the life cycle, right? So business architecture will play up front ahead of initiative solutions to really translate strategy and shape what's happening. Business architecture also looks at the whole organization, where business analysis is going to play further downstream, make those things real. Very close tie with business architecture, and business analysis is typically focused on a more specific scope. And then we have, as we're making our changes real in our business and technology environment, we have the people, right, with organization design. We have the process with business process management discipline, or whatever your organization refers to it. Solution architecture for the tech and others. And so, that kind of gives you a layout of the change delivery partners across that sequence. So I know we're a deep dive on business architecture today, but as I've said, the bigger picture idea is that strategy to execution is a cohesive process, end-to-end, seamless, with accountability, transparency, and people knowing how they work together from end to end to do that very important thing together. And where I've seen organizations do that really well is when they create some sort of a strategy to execution playbook. Or oftentimes I'll see transformation teams will be a place where this lives, but they have all of those stages from strategy to execution, and then they describe what's happening in each of those stages and how do all these people work together at the different points in time to actually perform their activities and work with each other. So that's how you put it together in the bigger picture. Again, architecture can be a great catalyst for other people to do that, and it's a dot connector to bring them together. So a reflection for you, kind of just take a thought now and come back to it. Who would be on your engagement model? In your organization, who are the most important teams for architecture to partner with? Right? So what's that list? And it's helpful to write them out, not just think in your mind, because as you're writing them out, you'll probably think of quite a few others. Do you know who your top priorities are? Are you having conversations with them? Are you close to them? All right? Do you have an ongoing forum to work with those teams? So those are some questions that you can ask yourself. So that gives us an overview of the change delivery partners. I'll walk through now integration with a few teams, just a real high-level touch on these. But starting with business and IT architecture, and you'll remember, as I said earlier, business and IT architecture together make enterprise architecture as a discipline, and of course we have different roles in between this. But per the BizBach guide, there are a few really important ties to make between the IT architecture and the business architecture. There's actually not all that many, so I like the elegance of that. Applications automate capabilities, software services automate capabilities. And for all the obvious reasons, capabilities are very ideal to help us scope software services, right? They're concretely bounded. They produce concrete outcomes. So those two are really the key ones. We can also use the business unit. So you remember seeing in the business ecosystem I shared right in the beginning, there was a domain called organization. So our business unit. And if we tie the business unit to capability, now we have an instance and we can understand, for example, if we have a lot of applications that are automating one capability, well, which application are each of the business units using, right? It gives us that granularity. So that's another key cross-mapping that we can add in there. So what about value streams? Value streams help us to orchestrate software services, just talking from the technology perspective. Because remember, capabilities are automated by software services. And our value streams are going to give us when do we need to use these different capabilities at what times to deliver value to a stakeholder, internal or external. So by default, the value streams are also giving us that flow of how we orchestrate software services. And they give us overall scaffolding for workflow, interface at a macro level, and so on. And then finally, as I've already alluded to earlier, the business information map, remember the information concepts that we looked at, the definitions, the types, the states, the relationships, that will inform our data architecture. So those are the key ties per the Guild. Just to give you a couple other views, just drawing out the close tie between capabilities and the business architecture, requiring or modifying information in software services and data. And again, this is obviously useful, particularly as we're working in ecosystems, right? So we're exchanging services not just in our organization, but also outside of our organization. So again, I just have a snapshot of a few things here. This is not the full view of everything. And stating the obvious, but it doesn't always happen this way, so worth mentioning, our business and IT architectures should be related in one repository. And as all of us as architects, we should have a common understanding of what our meta model is that our organization is using. And I've showed you some things here today. I showed you the Guild meta model standard later on, but whatever your organization is doing, it's just important for all architects to have the same idea in their mind so we can actually relate these things and do so consistently, because there's a lot of ties you can make. You may not want to make all of them or want to make all of them right now. I thought some of you may have questions or thoughts on TOGAF. So just a very quick mention here. So the Business Architecture Guild that I mentioned earlier, which has the BizBot Guide, is a member of the Open Group. And there are also a number of other companies that all together have done some really amazing work over the years to align TOGAF to the BizBot. And I did say align TOGAF to the BizBot, not the other way around. So strengthening the business architecture perspective there. So the first alignment was in TOGAF 9.2, and I have a circle there. The business capability and the value stream that you see there are aligned with the meaning, right? The notion that you would see in the BizBot Guide that we've been talking about today. And as of now, all 4 of the core domains in the BizBot Guide are aligned in TOGAF. And so that includes capability, value stream, organization, information. There are a number of other guides that are really good that are out there as well that are also aligned. So I think this is useful too for you to know that what we're talking about here is not in a vacuum or just one group of people that think something. We are really trying to get all the dots connected to all the frameworks and bring it together for people. Business architecture and business analysis. Just a tie here I wanted to make for you. So if we think back to, there it is again, that value stream and capability context. And if we know that we're making a change within this settle claim value stream and certain capabilities are going to have change, we can also use this as a starting point to define requirements. When I say requirements, I'm speaking generically. They could be ability to statements, they could be user stories, right? But as we're seeing here, if we know the scope of change, we've framed, right, where it's happening, then we can, in a much more accelerated and scoped way, be able to define requirements like, as an insured, I want to define my preferences to blah, blah, blah. So the word insured is actually coming from the business architecture. It would be in the repository. That is a stakeholder, one of the domains of the business architecture. So it wasn't, Wendy working with her SME and they decide to call it insured or whatever we did that day. It's actually anchored in the terminology we use. I want to define my preferences. So those words are also exactly aligned with the capability, customer preference definition. So again, using the words, consistent understanding, and spending less time figuring out things, we get a big lift from the business architecture. So if we framed, all right, these value streams, these capabilities, and here's the set of changes, people, process, info, tech we're making, that really speeds this process up. And it also, I just think about the heroics that business analysts do to figure out scope and connect dots. And, it sounds like you're doing the same thing as you're doing over here. We can head that off with the business architecture perspective because we already know who's involved. We looked in the repository, right? Or we already have, if we are shaping work from left to right, ideally, we've already made sure that we're not building the same thing multiple times. And we've also given a common vocabulary and a mental model that we all share in the organization so that we don't have to keep making it up and bringing people together and saying, what do you mean by this? What do you mean by this, right? We actually have that given to us so we can just get on with it and do the hard stuff and make the change. The other part that I alluded to earlier is we can actually tie requirements to capabilities, which makes them reusable, because one of the key points about business architecture is it lives in a reusable repository. So we have the list of capabilities there, it stays, all right, unless we change them. And so if we tie requirements to capabilities, well, now we have a catalog to actually be able to find them. And we have lots of good examples of clients saying, we saved 3 weeks because we could just kind of recraft this group of requirements instead of recreating the wheel. So people do actually do this, and it does save them a lot of time. It also, the tie from requirement to capability gives us a traceability back to business direction. So we can follow a requirement back to a capability through a value stream to, objectives, metrics, goals, and things like that, or capability assessments, right? So if we have a requirement that we're doing, but the capability is not currently supporting business direction, right? It's maybe not currently to help us achieve our strategy, or if that requirement is tied to a capability that's green, it's working perfectly, and it's not a priority, then it brings up the question, why are we actually doing any work upon that, right? So it's an objective view at prioritization through the business architecture. And again, business architecture, business analysis are two mutually beneficial disciplines that work together, as do the roles. Key cross mappings I've already talked about. So one more discipline here, and we'll flow from experience design to the value streams to processes. I really like how these things work together, because journeys, let's say customer journeys specifically, they're very different than value streams, right? You've seen value streams, you see they're modular, they're based around objects, right? Journeys are going to help us understand what does this experience need to look and feel like for a customer. So as a result, the journey scope may be upfront, maybe outside of what our organization does, and the words we use. And of course, I don't have it here, but the types of information we capture about journeys. How are people feeling? What are their expectations, right? Journeys are going to capture really different things, but they give us a pure outside-in view from the customer or constituent perspective. Value streams are kind of in the middle. They're written from the stakeholder perspective, but they're not as, customer focused in their language and their notation as journeys are. So value streams are kind of a bridge, and they're modular, so they can help us understand how we're going to make change, and then you can align processes, which we'll look at next, to those value streams. And now we have this beautiful continuum from the outside in to the inside out, and tying everything together. So as I have an example here on this slide, this is retail, for the customer journey stages of discover, shop, buy, and use, you can say I have the value streams aligned to those. And what you see here is a pretty common pattern where multiple journey stages apply to some sort of whatever value stream is where the customer buys a product or gets the product. And then there's often a number of value streams that are tied to use. In this case, something like return product or even establishing product, because the customer, in this retail example, their feedback will actually be a feedback mechanism into what products we should develop and how we should improve them. So that gives you an idea of the value stream alignment. And then I have the capabilities listed below. And of course, capabilities are tied to value streams. So again, we make the tie from journeys to value streams, and then the capabilities are linked through the value stream. And now we have a really nice traceability here, especially if we think about, remember, customers have, we can tie them to business units, processes, applications, and software services. So if we, let's say, the customer experience design team, or whatever customer team, we're really receiving some poor feedback in the buy stage. We want to know what's going on, right? One way to do that, again, is get all the smart people in a room, people who know what's going on, right? And let's talk through it and figure it out. Business architecture gives us a methodical way to do that and decide who to get into the room and what we might be dealing with. So we could simply go from the buy journey stage down to the value stream acquire product, look at the capabilities that are involved, and then now look at the people, process, info, tech. Maybe we could look at our capability assessment ratings. Maybe some of them aren't rated very well for a good reason, and that's, playing into the bad feedback we're hearing in buy, right? So you can use this construct to improve customer experience. And you use the same construct the folks who are working in human-centered design, not in a vacuum, as they want to change the experience. Again, it gets translated through the value streams and capabilities, and then the changes they want to make are harmonized with the rest of the organization. We can also take this traceability the other way. So let's say we have a big transformation or whatever set of work is going to be making some significant changes to product information management or something in customer management. We can again follow that through in the knowledge base to say, okay, before we do that, hold on. Let's see, follow it through the value stream, follow it back up to the journeys, and what are these changes that we're planning, what is that going to do to the customer experience? So allows us to also do some really good impact assessment before we make decisions. Just a kind of a practical example for you, because I do find a wonderful coupling between these journeys and the business architecture. And sometimes the teams work really closely together. Sometimes people even wear both hats. But if your organization has journeys, and if those have caught, traction, create a view just like I have with those first two rows. Under each journey, just align your value streams. It's a nice way to bring a customer and a human-centric lens to the business architecture, and also to show where the business architecture fits, especially because if you don't have pictures like this, people think, journey, 5 boxes, value stream, 5 boxes, safe, right? So this brings it to life and you can see how they fit together. Okay, so now let's look at how business architecture and business process partner together. Again, two mutually beneficial disciplines that work very, very well. So we have the two sides of the coin here again. Business architecture gives us that macro level business context and priority for design. And it also helps to translate business direction into coordinated execution, both of which are very relevant from a process perspective. So from a design perspective, business architecture can help to bring processes into the value stream context, into the broader business value context. Can also identify opportunities for collaboration and streamlining across processes, ensuring experiences are integrated and consistent. And we can also inform on the holistic impacts of making changes to process to the overall business and technology environment. And from a translating business direction perspective, business architecture, again, helps us to connect back to the bigger picture of what is it that the organization is trying to do and what are the priorities that we have right now, which is very helpful to inform process and investments in it. So just a quick view here, and as over the years we've been working to do alignment between business architecture and business process at the Guild. Now, one of the big realizations was that value streams do knit us together. From a business architecture perspective, as you see on the right-hand side there, capabilities, right? We look at value stream stages as collections of capabilities. But from a process perspective, we can also look at value stream stages as a collection of processes or even process activities. So just to say these things fit together nicely, and sometimes we will view the world differently depending on what it is that we do and how we want to see it. So in terms of the relationship or the cross mappings between business architecture and business process, key relationship between value streams and processes, as well as capabilities and processes. And I'll show a little bit more detail on how these things fit together. So value streams, as we know, break down into value stream stages, and capabilities enable those value stream stages. And process comes in here can map to value stream stages, and processes implement value stream stages. Processes also implement capabilities. And to look at that set of relationships with a real example, here I have a developed product value stream and its stages. And again, we can align processes to those stages, and those processes that you see there are helping to enable these value stream stages. And importantly, processes aligned to stages implement the capabilities that enable those stages. So I'll just let that sink in for a little bit, but we do have the alignment from capability to value stream and process to value stream, but processes are essentially implementing the capabilities in each of those stages. And one last tie to make here, I really like this diagram. So just to relate business architecture in one way to the SAP ecosystem, thinking about strategy, of course, we've talked about activating strategy, translating strategy, strategy execution, but from an intentional design perspective, business architecture gives that macro level framework to process design and also system design and decision making.